Greetings, bike guys. I just wanted to do a couple of videos. You've probably already seen some on which bike to buy. So I'm going to break that down a little bit. We're going to have at least 2 sessions. Part 3 will be on the beginner riders or new to the sport. And part 4 will be on intermediate or advancing riders. And then we'll go into some of those details. So stick around. Okay, so when I'm referring to beginner riders, who's kind of fits into that category in our minds? So we got brand new riders, people who have never ridden dirt bikes before. Maybe they got introduced to it by a friend or something like that, and they say, well, that looks like something I'd be interested in doing. So we have brand new riders and they have no skill sets developed. They need to be taught from the beginning, and just dragging somebody out and putting them on a dirt bike and turning them loose is not a good idea without some sort of training on how the brakes work, how the shifting works, how the clutch is your friend and how it keeps things. And if you've watched any of the videos that you can see on YouTube and other places like that with people who get on the bike maybe the first time and the bike takes off and they roll the throttle on by accident and then they're completely out of control. That we call that whiskey throttle, when you are tossed to the back of the seat and your hand slips on the throttle and it just takes off. That's a really dangerous situation for anybody. So make sure that you take some time really getting yourself familiarized with the bike and how all the pieces work and that, and do it in an open area, because we just watched one recently where poor guy started the bike up in the driveway and let the clutch out and the bike took off. He slid back on the seat, pulling the throttle wide open, went across the street, ran through a fence, in through a backyard and into another fence, and crashed in the 2 houses away in somebody's backyard. It's funny to watch, but it's not funny to be, and it's not funny to witness either. So the other category of new rider, or what I have under beginner riders, are riders that are returning to bike riding. Maybe they had a bike as a kid and rode around their neighborhoods and that sort of thing with their friends, but they haven't had a bike for quite a while, and now they're returning to it. So sometimes these guys get themselves in trouble as well, in the same way as they've lost the skills they have. You know, the old thing, if you've ridden a bicycle once and you just can get back on it and ride again. Well, not necessarily true on a motorcycle. There's too many moving parts. You get the acceleration of the bike going, the braking, how much brake and all that. And the new bikes have got way more brakes than the old bikes. The shifting and all of that stuff, you need to practice that and work on it. Now, we also have another classification that we like to address, and that's riders transferring from maybe mountain biking or road biking or something like that, and they've decided that they want to give this a try. So same rules kind of apply to new riders and riders that are returning. It's good for them to have a good place to do it on a machine that's easy to ride, and I'll go into that in a little bit. And then I have another classification, and it just falls under here because we have older riders and smaller riders. Older riders, they may have been riding for a while, but what bike do they pick? Maybe they don't need the latest, greatest 60 horsepower 450 motocross bike to get back riding again, or to even continue on in riding. Maybe the bike they have is now grown too big for them for either their skill set or their strength or their fitness and things like that. And then small riders. There are plenty of people who fit in the small rider group. There are youth that are coming up, 14, 15-year-old kid. or we get where I'm really delighted to see that we're getting a lot of women coming into the motorcycle industry and learning to ride and finding the joys in doing that. But many women are smaller in stature and they don't have a lot of upper body strength and stuff like that. So they also require a little care and getting the right bike for them. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few different bikes here, and then we'll throw up some video or some pictures on the video just so you can relate to that. A lot of times people equate the power the engine puts out by the size of the engine, and that does have some bearing on the type of power that it has, but some bikes are really not designed or made for beginner riders. And what I'm thinking there is in the 80cc to 125cc motocross type bikes. Well, they are small in stature and light, easy to move around, but those motors have been designed and built for motocross racing, and they have a very on and off type power, so it makes it hard to ride. And then there's a whole list of bikes here that we'll throw up some pictures for. There are some bikes that are built that are easier. For new bikes, I would suggest taking a look at the Beta X Trainer. It is a 300cc bike, but it's designed to be a good bike for learning on. That's why it's called an cross trainer or X Trainer. It's for training yourself how to ride off-road on, and they have a smooth power, easy to work suspension, a lower frame, and that sort of thing. Another bike in that range is Ryehu Ranger, which is a competitor to the X Trainer. And then there are some other bikes available. One of the brands that we carry is called GPX, and they have models from small bikes all the way up to full-size bikes, and they do it in a progressive manner. They have a 110cc that's big enough for adults to ride on, but it's what we call a pit bike or just for playing around. They have a 190 size, which is a much bigger, more powerful, same kind of a chassis, larger wheels and suspension. There's a 140 available, which would make a good trail bike for a very small rider. And then they also have a mild four-stroke called a 250E, FSE 250E, and that's a great bike for people who are fit into this beginner category. If you like a two-stroke, GPX also has what's called a TSE, which is two-stroke enduro, 250, and it also has a easy-to-control engine, but it's got full-size suspension and that sort of thing. Now, in used bikes, Honda kind of led the market for a lot of years with their XRs. And they have a XR 200, a 250, and a 230, and they're smaller framed, easier to manipulate on the engine and the brakes and things like that. Yamaha builds a line called TT, and they also have a 200, a 225, and a 250 with that same group in mind. For the casual rider, the new rider, and that sort of thing. Kawasaki has a series called KLX, and they have a 140, I believe, a 230, a 250, and a 300. Suzuki has fewer bikes than those in their line. They have one called a DR 250, which is an interesting little bike. And then KTM has an older bike, and we're talking about used bikes here, has an older bike called a 200 in an XC200, and that one also is a very friendly bike to learn to ride on. KTM also has two other versions called Freeride, and it's also got a smaller frame and that they come either in electric or in gas powered, but that was the idea behind that. And then the new market also has some electric bikes. We are dealers for a brand called Sur-Ron, and there's another similar one to that called Teleria, and I would have you consider maybe an electric bike for a brand new rider. You can get them so they have plenty of power, but they're lighter and easier to ride, and most of them do not have clutches, so they're automatic. You just turn the throttle and it'll go, and then they have decent brakes and things like that, so they're good learning bikes to go on. So then where do you ride? Well, you can go by your local shop and ask them where a place would be a good place for a beginner or a brand new rider. And many of the local shops know places that are legal for you to ride on, and you can get out and check those out. There are some open areas around. You have to be careful if you're riding like in an old sand pit or something like that. Sometimes they can be a little bit dangerous, and sometimes it's not really appreciated by property owners. But there are open areas that you can go out. Many states have off-highway vehicle parts or parks, which are called OHV, and they tend to have new rider, beginner rider, friendly trails, and that sort of thing. Now, I want to talk about the tools of the trade a little bit, and that's learning to use the clutch and the brakes. Be less concerned about getting the thing going, making it go before you figure out how to get it stopped. So learning how to use the brakes is exceedingly important. The clutch on the bikes that have clutches on them is also your friend. It's the way to turn the power off just by pulling in the clutch, and the power will stop pulling the bike, even if the motor's still revving. And it's also the way you get the bike rolling, and learning to use the clutch is a very integral part of learning how to do that. And you need to practice it. So I want to talk a little bit about practicing, and that is when you go out and you're practicing, maybe you ride in circles and figure eights, and you practice using your clutch and your brakes until you become confident before you get out on trails that may possibly put you in a dangerous situation. Find somebody that can help you in the process of putting together a ride time with some friends or somebody has some experience and that sort of thing. There are also places that you can go and get some rider training. So I would look into all of those things. And I hope that was helpful for the beginner riders, the new riders, the returning riders, and people that are transferring over from mountain bikes, older riders, and small riders. If you have questions or comments, please send us a comment, and we will respond to that. Thank you very much, and enjoy the sport as I have for many, many years. Talk to you soon.